There was a time in the life of Eli Wallach when he thought seriously of giving up his acting career to become a postman. He felt he was never right for the parts, too young, too old, too small. And then came the colorful role in Tennessee Williams' The Rose Tattoo, and 4 awards as Broadway's leading featured player of the year. The post office's loss was the theater's gain. That gain was compounded in 1948 when he married Ann Jackson, forming one of the most durable and competent acting teams in the theater. Alone, together with his wife, in films and television and on the stage, Eli Wallach has shown the method technique of acting to its best advantage and brought satisfaction to thousands of theater goers.
When it came, which is 40 minutes.
Mr. Wallach, you've played in a wide variety of films and in television plays and in stage plays and in a wide variety of roles, in a wide variety of cultures. You've moved around the world. You've shot films in various parts of the world and plunked down in various cultures and various roles. Don't you get a sense of disorientation sometimes?
Well, jet lag happens quite a bit.
Of course, we all get that.
But there's another type of lag. It is the behavior, the mores of a people. Let's say on the island of Crete, where I spent 3 months. Their sense of time and speed and involvement is quite different from ours.
You better slow down?
Yes, they say, just take it easy, tomorrow will happen.
Yeah.
I'll never forget, I was making a film in the jungle in Cambodia, Conrad's Lord Jim. And each morning I'd go to have a bowl of soup with a Cambodian man who ran a little stand, a sort of kneadings. And he used to smile at me. We spoke nothing together, you know, but he'd smile at me because I was dressed as a French renegade general, so on. And they had their experiences with the French, this man. But I think making films used to be an expression, join the Navy and see the world. Yeah. It's now join the movies and you see the world.
Well, this must have an effect upon the man as well as the actor.
Well, I've tried very hard to make a stable family relationship, not to be what, in quotes, these gallivanting jet-set actors. I have a wife and 3 children. My wife acts with me.
Yes, indeed, she does.
And we enjoy working together. But the demands of the profession or the trade make you move around quite a bit.
I've never thought of the man and the actor being anything but separate, incidentally. And yet, I believe you have been quoted as saying that a little bit of the real Eli Wallach works its way into many of the roles that you play. You do rely upon.
Of course, if it didn't, you'd be insane. I mean,
really?
I can pretend that I'm a French general, but I know full well when the makeup comes off, I'm me. And as a matter of fact, when the makeup is on, I'm me. Yeah. I'm distilling the outward form of the character through my experience, through my knowledge.
So in your interpretation, there has to be something of your own experience.
There must be.
And yourself.
Oh, sure. And you have to be, there are many elements, many layers while you're playing, you know. A monologue consistently goes on underneath. You're thinking, they don't like me tonight, or it's raining. And as soon as it rains in a theater, everybody says, the concentration goes because they say, did I leave the car window open? You see, and the play has gone out of their mind. But no, an actor has, while he's playing, his concentration must be very strong. When he's working, when he's creating, during the rehearsal process, all the time he's awake, he's thinking. Chekhov has a marvelous speech about the writer's problem. He says, I look up at a cloud and I say, that looks like a grand piano. I'll use that in a story sometime. In the middle of a fight that I may be having with my wife, I'll suddenly say, oh, my voice sounded very good there, you know. Yes. I'll use it. And I go beyond where the fight should stop, only because I'm checking myself, you know, as the actor.
Yes. You have to then build some of yourself into all your interpretation.
Of course, I'm not a Mexican bandit who's raiding towns in a film like The Magnificent Seven.
To what extent is acting used to cover up the real self?
Well...
Some actors do, don't
sure,
they? I mean,
sure.
It is a way to hide from the real world you have to face, is it not?
Well, I think, for example, Humphrey Bogart was always thought of as a very tough, hardened man. I'm sure he was a very sensitive, cultured man. Eddie G. Robinson, who just died. Eddie G. was an art lover and a very aesthetic man. And here he was playing gangsters all the time with a little cigar, you know. And a part of him must have said, well, damn it, I have to do that to make the money to buy those paintings that I love, you see. So we're rather split a lot of the time.
But you never become cast as a particular kind of character.
Well, in Italian, I spend most of my time making Italian movies. In Italian movies, I'm a half-breed bandit with a twinkle. In American films, I'm, I don't know, a shy, innocent man. On the stage, I'm what they call every man, in quotes.
Yes.
The vulnerable, sensitive man.
You grew up in the Italian section of Brooklyn.
Yes, I did.
Does this have any relationship to your playing in Italian movies? Because you're not Italian.
No, but I have a feeling that there's some affinity. You know, if you think of, what's the word, where you're resurrected, where you come back as someone else. What is that word?
Yes, I know what you mean.
Reincarnation.
Reincarnation, yes.
Well, I feel that I at one time must have been an Italian living in Sicily
because you feel like an Italian sometimes.
Yes, yes. But, of course, the first formative years of your life make an indelible impression on you. I became aware of temper and emotion and feeling, and I wanted to channel it somehow. I didn't know. I used to lie on my bed and pretend it was the Sahara, and I was in the Foreign Legion, and I'd get shot in the arm, and my mother would come in and say, it's time to eat, and I'd say, I'm bleeding, I'm bleeding. You see, I was acting, constantly acting. Who realized that many years later I'd be heating a sword in the fire, torturing Peter O'Toole in the Cambodian jungle somewhere. And here it is, my dream came true, you see.
Brooklyn's a bit far removed from the theater. You must have had your own theater in your own room, so to speak. You didn't come from a theatrical family. Your father ran a candy store, didn't he?
That's right. My father and mother had a candy store. But they used to go to the Yiddish theater on the Lower East Side. But
you were exposed to it then as a
I
youngster.
saw some theater as a kid, but the thing that made the deepest impression on me was the Italian puppe theater. They're life-size puppets. And those things impressed me tremendously because there were constant battles being fought with knights and bad people and war and so on, so that I was very exposed to this. I think, you know, people go through life saying, I wish I were, or I wish I had. I haven't got that wish. I think I've done what I wanted to do in terms of my career.
But your parents wanted you to be a teacher, didn't they?
Well, they want, yes, because everybody went into a respectable profession, law, medicine, teaching. When I said I wanted to be an actor, that was kind of a jolt. They couldn't understand what adrenaline was flowing through me. But I was convinced I could be an actor. Of course, a lot of people...
How were you convinced you could be an actor?
Well, I thought I had some secret key, some way of saying things that people would identify with, or touching people, or moving people. Now, some people do it via teaching. Isn't there? There's nothing more beautiful than to form a mind than to influence a mind. Some people do it through medicine, and some people do it through law. Now, in my career as an actor, I've played a teacher. I've played a lawyer. I don't know how many films I've done where I've been a lawyer and said, no more questions, things like that. Or I played doctors.
What was the first role you ever played as a youngster?
Oh, I played an old man who didn't believe in God anymore because he had lost a child.
How old were you then?
I was about 11, or 10 or 11. And the kids in the front row kept saying, that's Eli. You know, I was furious with them.
Why?
Well, because I was supposed to be the old man. I thought, since I'm playing an old man with white and everything, they should believe that I'm an old man.
They were destroying the illusion you were creating.
Yes, yes.
It's been said that you still get a little angry if the make-believe doesn't come through.
Well, I think the most magical thing in a theater is to engage an audience and to have them hooked in with you. I'll never forget one performance I did in a play called The Typist and the Tiger with my wife.
With your wife, of course.
With Ann Jackson. And a man sitting in the front row, I'm farsighted, incidentally, and she's nearsighted. When we play scenes together, she keeps leaning in and I keep leaning back, you see, because we can't focus. But I looked down in the front row and there was a man, the curtain had just gone up, and this man sat there like this. And I thought, well, damn it, the play's just started. Why isn't he paying any attention?
Maybe he was a critic.
He could have been, yes. But I thought, and this monologue goes on as you're doing the play. I said, well, maybe he doesn't like me. Then the other part of me says, the id part says, but he paid his money, he's got a perfect reason. It's all right for him to come to the theater. If he doesn't want to raise his head and look at you, the hell with it. So, at the end of the show, the stage manager came back and said, someone wants to see you. And they led onto the stage a blind Indian novelist named Ved Mehta.
Ved Mehta.
Who said, I saw the play tonight, I want to tell you I enjoyed it very much. And I never told him that monologue that had gone through my mind all the time we were playing.
Are there moments, incidentally, on the stage when that monologue doesn't go through your head, when you're totally lost in the character?
Well, there are times when I'm moved by something and tears come up, and if you try to pin it down, it eludes you. It's like trying to pick up a piece of mercury. That reminds me of a story of Dudley Diggs, who was a great old actor, was playing with Herbert Berghoff, and they were doing The Iceman Cometh. And each night, Dudley Diggs would open a letter and read it. And at a certain point, a certain line, a tear would perch on the bottom of his lid, and then it would plop down on the page. And Herbert Berghoff, who was a marvelous acting teacher and a director, came to him and said, Mr. Diggs, how do you do it? How do you do that each night? What do you think of? And the old actor just said, he wasn't about to divulge any of his craft, you see? So, I love acting, and I love actors.
What is there about actors that
well,
makes you
Anne
love
says
them?
we're braver than astronauts in the sense of exposing ourselves on a stage, revealing certain emotions that crop up in other people that are universal, that they can identify with. And it's historically, it's been going on all this time. It's the greatest propaganda machine in the world. I mean, the Chinese act out. They have a traveling theater. When I was in the army in Africa, a man would beat a drum and tell stories. He was a storyteller. Today you have movies and television. We constantly act out the human dilemma because people can identify with it. It makes life easier.
People who reveal so much of themselves, who are exposed so much of the time, usually feel empty or naked at times, and they need something, need someone to come to and say, you were great, Eli, just great. Don't you have to have that sort of thing?
Well, I think one of the reasons movie making is not so satisfying is that you do something and a year later it's shown and then they ask you questions in an interview and you've forgotten what churned inside you to make that happen. I said to you, movies are like a basketball game. You throw the ball in the air and it's not going in the basket, but you lean over to make it go in, you know. A play is different. The curtain goes up, you engage yourself with an audience, and you get an immediate dividend, an immediate response. And that's why I love doing a play. We just closed in Waltz of the Toreadors after 3 months, a month in Washington, and my wife and I are going out on a tour across the United States now. We open in Baltimore, and then we go to Boston, Wilmington, Cincinnati, Chicago, and Los Angeles.
You've got your home here, and you've been playing here in the Waltz of the Toreadors. Yes. Now you're going to move around. Is touring a bit of a strain?
Well, yes, because I'm a very methodical person. The mail has to be done, the checks have to be paid, the bills. My wife says, wait till the end of the month to pay the bill. I hardly get it out of the envelope. You see, we're two different people in terms of our ways of living and ways of working.
Would you say that's a prescription for a stable marriage or a stable professional relationship? Or is that pushing you a bit too hard?
Who knows? I wish I could say
but
what
it
makes
works in your case, anyway.
It does, because I enjoy acting with her. But I think what makes a marriage work is very difficult to explain. Very difficult.
There are some we've talked with who have a stable marriage, but in their professional lives, even though they may both be the same thing, they find it best to keep those separate. You say you like acting with Ann Jackson.
Well,
And you're
we
both
didn't-
fine actors.
Well, we didn't do, Jim, we didn't do what the Lunts did, who after a few years of marriage, or shortly after they married, made a pact and said, we will never appear separately. Toward the end of their lives, they began to appear separately. We've not had any rule of thumb. If some wonderful opportunity comes up for Anne in a film or a play, she's certainly welcome to do it. I mean, in the last few years, she did a play called Inquest. She played Ethel Rosenberg. She did that alone. She did Sticks and Bones on television recently for Joe Papp's theater, alone. I mean, with a cast, not with me. But if we find something that we love to do together, then we do. We found an old play by Hector MacArthur called 20th Century. It was done in 1931. We looked up the director, who was George Abbott, and we did it again in 1971. And that was a great, great fun for us. You see, an actor who is used, who practices his craft, who works, is a flourishing actor. All too often in this country, the actor has been worried about the economic aspects. You see, England, he becomes Sir Laurence Olivier. In France, he wears the little red thing and he's the Legion of Honor. In Russia, he's an honored artist of the Soviet Union and so on. In America, if he's successful, he accumulates an agent and a tax man, and he's got problems, you know?
Yes.
I would say that the best thing that can happen in America, and more the big companies are finding it out, they're devoting certain of their funds into the arts. Because people must have more than just the day-to-day, the toaster and the refrigerator.
Just as recreation?
No,
More than recreation.
for yeast for the mind. You see, a good play not only entertains and amuses you, a good one educates you. I mean, George Bernard Shaw said, when I give them the lesson, they open their mouth in laughter, and I put the pill in.
It gives us some insight into ourselves.
Yes, it does. I mean, there's nothing better or more cleansing than a good cry in a theater. People love to do that. I'm lucky, I think, very lucky, in having had a diverse career and moved from media to media with apparent ease, loving to, as the farmer does, plow up his soil every few years, jump from a television show into a play, into a movie. In that way, you become rarer.
Yeah, there was something I recalled in my reading about you, that you had done a movie. I've forgotten for the moment which movie it was, in which you were reasonably well paid. And you felt you had to do penance for being so reasonably well paid, and went and worked for the BBC for little money, and then came back and did something off Broadway.
Then I did a lecture on the method with Anna Magnani in Rome, and my wife. And then I came back and did a play called The Chairs with Joan Plowright.
What was the movie? I'd forgotten which one it was.
The movie was a film directed by Don Siegel called The Lineup.
The Lineup, of
which
course,
I killed 5 people.
I see.
And I thought, well, after that, I've got to repay my debt to society. See? But for example, my first movie, I was on the stage in Tea House of the August Moon playing an Oriental.
Sakini.
Sakini, an Okinawan.
Yes.
And I was now in my 2nd year with this play, but I loved the play. And Kazan came to me and offered me a part in a movie called Baby Doll, written by Tennessee Williams. And I went to the Maurice Evans, who was the producer, and said, I'd like to go do the film. He said, well, you'll have to give us 2 weeks for each week you're away on the film. Well, the film took 13 weeks, so I advanced my contract 26 weeks more on the stage. But I loved the change. I grew a mustache and played a Sicilian cotton gin manager in Mississippi.
Yes.
And then when it was over, I took off the mustache and went back to playing an Oriental.
It was a very controversial film. I remember it very well.
Yes, it was.
And that wasn't the only Tennessee Williams thing you've played in. Rose Tattoo is what got you started, in a sense.
And then I did a great play of his called Camino Real.
Camino Real after that. And then you met your wife in a Tennessee Williams play, did you not?
Yes.
What's the affinity with Tennessee Williams?
I don't know. I think he's one of the greatest playwrights alive. Dead or alive. I think Tennessee is a poet, a philosopher, a humanist, and a wonderful writer. Doing a play of his is most gratifying.
Why? What is the element that makes it gratifying?
Well,
the thought, the action, the words?
The language is
the
beautiful.
Language.
Incidentally, if you transpose one of his words, the rhythm is wrong. It's like Shakespeare in that sense. Also, he's exposing the human dilemma and trying to not solve it, but to show it to you.
But why does that give an actor satisfaction?
Well, the usual pap one has to do in television or in the movies, where you say you're a cop and you come out of a car and say, wait here. That doesn't engage your brain very much, you know. When I have a speech in Waltz of the Toreadors by Ennui, in which I discuss love and life, when I say to a boy, life, Gaston, is one long family lunch, tiresome because it must be performed according to a long established ritual with initial napkin rings, forks of different shapes and sizes, and a bell push under the table. It's a game we've agreed to play. Well, that kind of language and that discussion of what life is very gratifying, very satisfying. It's like reading a good book instead of a paperback, instead of pulp.
There's been a good deal of discussion over the years about the method and actor studio, and there's no point, I suspect, in our going over that.
Well, I must say at the beginning we were a rather stuffy group. We thought we had the what is that, elixir of life. We had the only answer to what made an actor work. Since then, we've found out that a good many actors, all good actors, have their own method. Who knows where it comes from.
So you can begin with this kind of technique, but ultimately you adapt it to your own method.
A good method is a technique which allows the motor to kick over. It's the kind that goes out into a car in the morning and says, it's cold. Now, how do we get the motor churning? That's a good method. That's a good technique. However, if you haven't got a good car and you haven't got a sense of driving, you can kick that motor over and make it turn, but it won't chug along very well, you see. The method in the beginning, we were a kind of an odious bunch. We were difficult to get along with.
You were among the very first to go into the actor studio, weren't you?
Yes, we were the first classes in 1947. The English used to have an expression saying, oh, nonsense, old chap, just get on with it. And I remember an English actor saying, get on with what? That's what the method is about. Get on with what? The fact is that the author has written this. Now we must perform it. We must bring it to life. And I think the method has had, people still go. I'm still involved with the actor studio. They still work. It's a marvelous gym in which to stretch your muscles. But I think sometimes there's not enough time in working on a piece to put all of that effort and energy into it for that short a time.
Can you approach it with nonsense, let's get on with it? Can you walk up to the
Sometimes,
role now?
incidentally, sometimes just walking into it with nonsense and let's just do it leaves you open enough and vulnerable enough so that you do begin to kick over the motor. That takes great courage, you know. Great courage to say, I'm not going to perform or push. I'm just going to listen, and things will happen to you. If you try to cry, the tears will elude you. If you leave yourself alone, you don't say, or a drunk, for example, a drunk doesn't say, I'm drunk, and I'm going to play a drunk. A drunk tries to be rather sober, but his speech has a little difficulty. That's it, and that's drunk enough. You know. But you see, the trick with the actor, why they thought he was a magician, why they thought he was an evil, with witchy powers, was because he could observe something that a person would say, yes, I felt that, I've thought that, I've never expressed it. But he's saying it for me and I see it now. That kind of internal medicine is what's wonderful for the actor. He's an internist, or should be.
Are there roles that you haven't played that you want desperately to play? Sounds to me as though you've done pretty much what you wanted to do anyway.
You see, the American actor rarely has had the opportunity to come into contact or conflict with the classics. Rarely. He hasn't got the equipment. He hasn't been trained to do it. I'd love to go on and do some Shakespeare.
Well,
Sure, sure.
You've done almost nothing in classic theater, have
Well,
you?
we did. Yes, I did Antony and Cleopatra. I did Henry VIII. I did Major
That was
Barbara
some years ago,
show.
though.
Yes.
With Eva Le Gallienne.
Yes.
But not in recent years.
No.
Would you like to return to some of that?
Well, I'd like to find good plays. The Waltz of the Toreadors is, for me, one of the greatest exhuming things that ever happened. I love doing it. I think it's a pertinent and alive play. We played in Washington while Watergate was on, and a lot of people in Washington thought we put in special material for Watergate.
Still something to be learned from the plays, then.
Yes, yes.
What part does living play in the role of an actor, living in terms of his craft, not in terms of his life off the stage, experience, just the sheer act of going through life? Do you feel that you give more to the roles as the years go on because of what you've learned in life?
The actor always regrets that he wishes he knew at this point in his life what he knew 10 years later. You go back, see, an actor gets an opportunity to see himself on a screen of something he did 15 years ago and think, where were the nuances? Why wasn't I more subtle? Why? You know, now if I could do it, it would be better. Well, I've had an advantage of hindsight. That's the great luxury of the theater. I've done this play, Waltz, now almost a year, off and on. I've dropped it and gone to do a film. Each time I've come back to it, refreshed, and said, I won't do it that way again. No, 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 I see now what he's getting at. And the insights come forth which eluded me before.
There's always something new to be learned then.
Exactly. I did a play with Charles Lawton called Major Barbara. I came off stage one night 2 months after we'd started, and I said, of course, you idiot. You walk like that because you did military service. Now that question had been lying dormant for 2 months in my mind, trying to figure out why I did it. And the more I tried to figure it out, the more it eluded me, so that when it did happen, there it was. It came over me, and I thought, you see, I did it instinctively.
Thank you very much, Eli Wallach.
Okay.